name's Kate Glassball, for those of you who haven't been to any of our sessions before, and I've been helping to set up this online programme of events. This is one of our member-only events. It's had a great turnout, and we're delighted to welcome you all here. I just want to say that myself and my colleague Eleanor are here to offer support, just technical backup should you need it. If you have problems or you're thrown out, we'll keep an eye on the waiting room to readmit you. So please sit back and enjoy this. I would like to introduce you to our London chairs, Nina Kristofferson and Teresa Howard, who are chairing the session today. Over to you two.
Thank you very much, Kate. We're really delighted to have along today three wonderful people from the Arts Council. Erica Campayne, who's the relationship manager for theatre, Neil Darlison, the director of theatre, and James Trevelyan, the relationship manager for theatre, for literature. This idea first came to Nina and I for doing this when I discovered a very ancient new theatre writing scheme thing. I'm just going to show it here, which was from 1983. And it was just so interesting what the kind of instructions for writers were back then. And we just thought it would be really useful and helpful for the Arts Council to come along and just address writers. And so amazingly, they've said yes. And first of all, they're going to give you a presentation, really helping you to understand how to do grant applications. So I'll hand over to you, Neil.
Okay, yes. As Teresa said, my name's Neil and I'm Director of Theatre for the Arts Council with a specific responsibility for organisations in London. So, I mean, as you will know, the Arts Council is it's what's called a non-departmental public body, which is an organisation which is funded by the government, but is responsible to government, but makes decisions independent of government. And obviously we have counterparts in Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland. And it's funded mostly through taxpayers' money, but of course you'll also know a percentage of the proceeds from the National Lottery also go to fund some of our programmes. So that's where we sit in government, and that's where the money comes in. I think it's always, in my storytelling way, it's always good to sort of have that focus and bring it down to kind of where we are, who we are, and how we're funded. So Erica, James and I are going to take you through a presentation which will hopefully answer quite a lot of your questions about how the Arts Council works, and particularly centred around our National Lottery project grants, which of course will be funded through money for the National Lottery, which is very tightly regulated. Actually, it has to be it's a requirement by government legislation that it has to be open to the public in a way that taxpayers' money we could be more directive with. So I'll start because we want to leave as much time as possible for questions at the end. So in the words of Chris Whitty, next slide, please. Have I got control of the slides?
I should have, but for some reason it won't.
Okay, well, I'll keep talking and then we'll do the big reveal in a minute. So we've just launched our new 10-year strategy. I just say launched, it was about a year and a half ago now, which is called Let's Create, which after quite a big consultation with the arts and cultural sector, looks at how the Arts Council is going to fund organisations between 2020 and 2030. Prior to that, we had Achieving Great Arts for Everyone, and you have those avid Arts Council watchers. And it has three, as you can see, three major outcomes that it seeks to realise. One of which is the creativity of the people of England. The other is realising cultural communities, and the other one is a national outlook, whereby we have a creative and cultural country, and that's more to do with the country as a whole, the art it produces, and where we sit on an international landscape. So Let's Create is on our website. It's very readable. So if you want to find out a little bit more about creative people, cultural communities, and a creative and cultural country, then there's some greater definitions on the website. We've also devised what we call some investment principles, and everything that the Arts Council funds in the future will be guided by these 4 investment principles. And if I can just slightly unpack those, one is ambition and quality, what the scope for the work is, who you're going to work with, what the art you're going to make looks like. The second one is about who makes that work, who sees that work, who is included in that work, and how it increases the diversity of who we fund and support through National Lottery funds. The third one is about the sustainability in the practice of that work, environmental responsibility, and about the work that we fund now, as far as possible, is carbon neutral. You might be aware of many initiatives within the sector, particularly within the theatre sector, that are pushing the boundaries of how theatre is made and how audiences attend work, and how international work is made with the least impact on the environment. So that's another consideration we'd take into account when funding organisations. And the fourth one is, or individuals for that matter, and the fourth one is dynamism. How the organisations we fund, and this is, I mean, dynamism, the principle came about before the pandemic, but it's particularly relevant now, whereby how the organisations we fund have models or business models that react to the external circumstances. We want those organisations and individuals we fund to be successful. So how do they react to external circumstances? What mechanisms do they have within their finances to do that? So those are the 4 investment principles. I'm happy, Erica or James, if you think I've not done them justice, but I believe I have.
No, I think that's great.
Thank you, Erica. Exactly the right answer. Next slide, please. Oh, there we are. I just want to talk a little bit before I hand over to Erica about the equality objectives that the Arts Council has and is required by law to have. And let me say that these are not just words. This cuts right through everything we do at the Arts Council. Any application, any applicant, will be viewed through this lens. So it's why it's quite high up in the slides that we're showing you today. So you can see, I'm not necessarily going to read them all out, but it's about who gets to see the work that we fund and who gets to participate in that. And they are underrepresented. There are underrepresented groups within that we seek to correct through Let's Create. We ensure that the work and the projects that we fund recognise the diversity of the country and of the UK. Crucially important to the work that we and the organisations that we have funded and do fund. Clearly challenging any racist behaviour and making sure that any embedded discrimination within our policies is addressed, or hidden discrimination within our policies is addressed as far as we possibly can. And we'll be looking at how our project grants are more data driven in the future to make sure that we eradicate anything of that sort. Again, post-pandemic, looking at how that the work that we fund is more inclusive to children, young people, and older people as a result of COVID-19. And through our priority place work, which is particularly focusing around the country on areas that are under engaged and where our investment is not as great as it is in others, then improving access to those from a lower socio-economic background. So, I mean, those 5 points there are really important, and the applications and activity that we invest in, that we fund and that we support will be viewed through the lenses of our equality objectives, so, and our inclusion and relevance principle, which was on the previous page. So is it you next, Erica? Next slide, please.
It is. So today we're going to talk to you about two different funding programmes that we run at the Arts Council that would be relevant to you. So the first is project grants, and then later on we'll talk a bit about developing your creative practice, which we call DYCP. So with project grants, to be clear, it's about projects activity that will happen that will engage with an audience. And that can be an audience that you're reaching during the lifespan of the project, or it could be in the future if you were coming in for a research and development phase, for example. You can apply to project grants at any time throughout the year, and there isn't a good time to apply. People often ask if there's like a quiet time when they could sneak an application through, but we manage, you know, demand and funding for each of the panels to try and keep a steady success rate no matter when you apply. And the project grants you can apply to from up to £100,000, though if you're coming in for the larger amounts, you would want to be having a conversation with the Arts Council before you make those grant applications. So we split project grants into two different funds. There's the under 15,000, and you get a shorter turnaround for that one. So it's 6 weeks. And then if you're applying for over 15,000 up to 100,000, it takes 12 weeks until you get a decision. The form has the same sections and questions, and we'll talk through that in this presentation. But for the more that you're asking us for, the more depth that you have to show in your application, and there's more questions. And you make all these applications through our online portal called Grantium, and it's worth flagging that you need to register and make a new account at Grantium if you've never applied before. And that can take up to about 5 days. So you want to bear that in mind if you were maybe thinking of making an application quite quickly. And so there's no harm in having that account registered and waiting for when you're ready to make an application. So, go to our next slide. So these are the different art forms that we fund at the Arts Council, and so any application that is made to us needs to sit within at least one of those, and it can go across many different art forms as well. They're pretty self-explanatory, but combined arts might not be familiar to you, and so that includes, what we mean by that is festivals, participatory arts, big sort of outdoor spectacles, circus. So we've created the term sort of combined arts to really include all of that work. And so as we're sort of talking today, we're imagining that a lot of the applications you make might sit within literature or theatre, but it could absolutely be writing in collaboration with any of the other art forms as well. And that's really welcome. We are split and we are managed by those different art forms and teams, but you don't need to worry about that when you make your application, as long as you're including these art forms that we do fund. And now James will talk to you about some of the art forms that don't fit within our funding portfolio. Oh, he'll do that later.
I was going to say, will I?
Yeah, I know, preempting you, sorry.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm going to try and sort of position this as much as we possibly can for writers and writers applying. So writers, as Erica was saying, will likely come in under literature or theatre art forms, that you don't need to worry about that. And these are some examples of the kind of writing activity we might support in project grants. I suppose most often as writers, the core of your activity might be writing the book or the show that you want to work on. And in terms of eligibility through literature, we fund all genres with, I think we still have the slightly controversial phrase, literary merit. Anything that demonstrating literary merit. So I suppose that's fiction and poetry most commonly, but also creative non-fiction, graphic novels, and other kinds of sort of creative digital writing projects as well. In theatre, we fund new writing, including plays, musical theatre, opera, and audio drama that's recorded and shared as podcasts, that kind of thing. You can apply for research and development time to write or to preview the theatre or spoken word show, perhaps, that you've written. And your projects might focus on or include public-facing work, so workshops or events or other participatory work as well. But we are constantly surprised by the range of projects that that come in for applications. Next slide, please, I think. And here we are. Some things, it is worth noting that we can't fund through project grants. Engaging the public is the key part of the fund stipulation, so we'll keep talking about that probably as we go through, and Neil already mentioned it, and we are Arts Council England, so the project must reach audiences in England as part of the stipulation. We can't fund anything retrospective, so things that have already happened or things that will happen before you receive funding, before that period, while it's under consideration. And we can fund learning and development for sure, including kind of things from course providers, but we can't fund any school or university fees. So that's a separate thing. I suppose the last thing to mention on that list there that might be relevant to some of you is film and TV even have their own producers or funding bodies in England, like the BFI. We do fund some sort of artistic moving image work, and also obviously regularly see sort of filming and sort of digital aspects, digital outputs as part of projects that we fund. But if you are thinking about narrative cinema or short films, for example, that's or TV, that's other funding bodies or producers who you would approach for that. And next, please. Oh yeah, of course. And I won't spend much time on this. I hope we can send these slides to the Writers Guild afterwards to sort of disseminate, so you have this information. But it's just important to say that we want to remove as many barriers for to applying for this fund and others as possible. So we do offer access support funds. So if you need different formats of the guidance or a support worker to help you write the application for whatever reason, then Arts Council will pay for that, and you just need to get in touch and we can arrange that to happen. I think it's back to Erica.
And now we'll spend some time talking through the different sections of the application form. Aside from the basic details that you'll fill in when you apply, for the under 15,000 and the over 15,000, you'll need to answer prompts regarding quality, public engagement, management and finance. So in the quality section, overall, what we're trying to find out in this section are what are the artistic aims of the project, and do you and your creative team have a track record that makes us feel confident that you'll be able to achieve those artistic aims? Will you be able to make sure the project happens? We understand that there's creative risk and that maybe not all elements might happen or the quality might not be as high as you were hoping for. There might be learnings. We understand that, but ultimately, will the project happen and will it be able to reach an audience as you've outlined? So in this section, we ask you to talk about a brief summary of your relevant work experience. And it's really important to hold on to that word relevant, because I understand we've all had a varied careers and have these portfolio careers. So the word count won't be enough to cover everything that you've probably done. So you want to really highlight experience that speaks to this particular project that you're applying to us for. And also, if you are developing your skills through this project and you might be branching into new areas of work that you might not have done before, that's exciting for us. And what we would then want to see is that you have built a creative team around you that does bring those skills that you might not have as the lead applicant, and that you are developing, and that you can speak to that in the application. So you'll also talk about the aims of the activity. Feel free to use bullet points anywhere in the application form. It's really helpful for us reading it, and it's also really helps your word count and helps you to be really succinct. And you can talk about how the activity is developing your creative development, like I've just mentioned, as well as that of other creative team members as well. And then in the who is involved section, you get to list the different individuals that you're working with on your project. You get to talk about their particular role in the project, and it's useful to use this sort of extra box that you have in the form to really give us a bit of information about what they will specifically be doing on the project. And then you can talk about their relevant track record as well, and really show us why they're going to bring the skills that you need to this project because of their track record. Okay, then the next section is public engagement,
which is back to me. I would say most applications really live or die by public engagement in many ways. Back to the fact that reaching audiences is one of the key aims for the project grants, and that's audiences both now and in the future. So we call that public engagement, and again, I'm going to try and frame this around how you might approach it for a writing project, although I know that come in various different guises. So your core activity might be writing your new piece of work, and that often is a fairly solitary thing and might reach audiences in the longer term. And I do encourage writers, though, to consider your entire writing life when you're applying. So you'll definitely let us know about those future audiences that you expect to reach once the piece is written and out in the world, with a publisher, with a venue, or whoever it may be. But also tell us what else you might be doing that will reach and engage people during the writing process. Really think broadly about what you do. So perhaps you might be conducting research interviews with particular groups of people. You might be teaching workshops already as part of your kind of practice as a writer, your life as a writer. You might be performing older works or works in progress at events, part of this work that you're working on, or sending out sections of this or other shorter works for publication in journals or newspapers, magazines. So yeah, just always encourage you to sort of be thinking about what else you're doing, reaching audiences, if the core activity is actually just quite a sort of solitary thing of writing, getting that thing written. When you come to answer the questions, what we really need to see is that you've got clearly defined and segmented audiences and plans for how you're going to reach them. And what I would say is that partnerships are often key to demonstrating strong public engagement in that way. So working with other organisations or institutions can show us that you have access to larger networks than you do yourself, and also, of course, help to reach those networks of people. And I suppose depending on your writing project, a committed publisher for a book is a really wonderful partner to have, as well as sort of a committed venue for a show. They're really excellent examples. But also think broadly, if you have that or not, about who else could support the ambitions for your project in terms of reaching people. And that could be a writer development agency that we fund, or a literary organisation, or a theatre organisation, or it could even be a local community centre or charity. Sort of linking back to what Neil was saying earlier about where Arts Council's priorities lie in making sure it's reaching the broadest range of people. Those are all great things to thinking about when you're thinking about who to reach with your project. Back to you.
So then we have the finance section of the application, where you'll outline the different income that you have for the project, and you can include in-kind support as well from any of those partners that James has mentioned. So that could be that they might be giving you marketing support, which you're not paying for, but they'll do. And then you'll get a sense of how much that would have cost if you were paying for that. You can include that in there, venue hire, all sorts of different support you might be getting in kind. And that can really demonstrate commitment from the partners as well, particularly for the larger grants. It can really support your application if you're able to demonstrate that sort of support, as well as any cash support. If you were applying for a theatrical show, you can include earned income, as you can include box office income as part of your earned income. And so that would obviously be a forecast. And so what you would do to make us feel confident that you could achieve that is you would really be clear as to the sum that you use to work out that box office hit, that you've made sure that it's net, that it isn't based on 100% of seats being sold, but a slightly lower capacity. And also that we feel very confident in your public engagement plans that you will be able to reach an audience that will buy the tickets that you need to kind of provide the match income. At the moment, it isn't a criteria for match income, so you don't have to demonstrate very much, if any, but it's really important if you have it that you include it, because it really can support an application. And then you have your expenditure, and to make sure that in your expenditure for any fees, again, that you give us a breakdown of the days and the fee where that's relevant, so that we can understand that you're demonstrating fair pay. There is a question about fair pay on the application, and it's really important that we fund applications that are demonstrating fair pay. So it's important to include that and make that clear for us. And then we'll also ask about your experience in managing budgets. And it doesn't necessarily just have to be your own experience, though you can include experience such as being self-employed and managing invoicing and tax returns and all of that financial management that you have to demonstrate, as well as talking us through how you will manage the project itself and the process of invoicing and managing your cash flow as the project gets larger. But you can also demonstrate the skills of any partners that you're working with. So maybe you're coming in for a larger grant than you have done before, but maybe you are working with a partner organisation or partner producer who actually can say that they're going to manage the finances with you and work really closely with you, and that they have experience of managing larger grants. And that's really helpful and really good to see. So it doesn't all have to be your own experience in this section.
And in a very similar vein, really, the management section is the final section, which I won't spend too much time on because I think they blur again. We just really want to know if you fully thought the project through and that you're capable of managing the activity that you're proposing. So this is where you will list the partners and tell us a bit more about them and those people that are involved in the project. And that partners, again, I say they're great across every area of the application, because in quality they show that someone out there that thinks the work is high quality and wants to be involved. They help with public engagement in terms of reaching their own networks and widening the networks for the work. And in the management section, they also show that there's a kind of a support network there for you to fall back on of potentially, not necessarily, but potentially more experienced people that are running projects, potentially. And what else in the management? If you're running events or planning to put on shows, whether that's a tour or work in progress, tell us about your schedule, tell us when they'll take place. And no matter what you're doing, put down a full and comprehensive project timeline in that section. Include details, so plot in the periods of writing, learning, maybe events, collaboration is really useful to see a fully formed plan of project activity and milestones. Next slide, please. Which I think brings us on to developing your creative practice, which I will shorten to DYCP, which is our other fund that you can apply for. And this is, as Erica said, just a quick overview of it, but hopefully, again, something useful for you. This fund might be most applicable to you if you want to learn new skills, develop your existing practice in some kind of substantial way, or even explore other genres, other genres that you're writing in. So the focus of the fund really is on your artistic practice. So as silly as it sounds, I always encourage you to keep the fund's title in your mind when you're applying. I've just come off the back of the latest round and looking at the applications for that. And just to emphasize, this really isn't the fund to write the piece of work that you've been planning on writing for a long time, necessarily. So many applicants fall into the trap of sort of prioritizing the development of a piece of work, the finishing of a book, the writing of the show, over the development of their practice, which is kind of what we want to see, is it? So this fund's for you to show that you're improving as a writer, and improving through, I would suggest, through more than just kind of dedicated writing time. So think about the learning or training that you might want to undertake to facilitate the kind of development that you're after. You might be researching different techniques or genres. You might want to work on something much more ambitious or in a different format that you normally do, and something that requires some support to help you undertake that kind of step change in your work. Yeah, and the fund encourages you to take risk and work in new ways, so we want to see that. And I suppose most attractively, it only asks 3 questions, so it's much the shorter application form. What we want to know really is your track record, your relevant experience, similarly to the project grant one. We want to know what development work you'll do with the funding, what you're proposing to do with the money. and also where you expect that to leave you as an artist, the kind of impact that it's going to have on you and how it sort of plays a role in your aims for your career and your work. With such a short application form, as I'm sure you can expect, we get a huge amount of applications to this fund. But I think it's really brilliant for writers if you want to focus on your creative development in some way. The only other difference to mention from project grants is that it's only open 4 times a year for windows of sort of 4 submission windows, whereas project grants is open all the time. So keep an eye out for that. But in fact, very timely, the next one is opening very soon. So yeah, have a look at more guidance on the website for developing your creative practice.
So we're drawing to the end of the presentation now. So we just wanted to reiterate some of the support that's out there that we provide when you're making your application. So there's the link to where you can get the guidance for project grants. We also provide that guidance in different formats if it's needed. And then also if you're if you need any support whilst you're using Grantium, you can contact our inquiries team, who are excellent. They're a fantastic team based in the Hive in Manchester, and they can answer any of your questions related to Grantium. They can also access it and look online at the same time as you're looking at it and really help you talk you through it. They can also answer any questions you might have about eligibility as well. So if you're not sure, you can always send them an email. It's obviously a very busy time for them, but they will get back to you as soon as they can. And then also the relationship managers like James and I also offer one-to-one surgeries for particular applicants. So those are first-time applicants or people who have recently been unsuccessful for their sort of first application. And then we can provide more targeted advice to support you as well. And so here are James and I's email addresses, which you can take if you want to get in touch with us or ask any questions. But I'll stop sharing the screen and hand back to Teresa and Nina so that we can take any questions that you might have.
Erica and James. I mean, just to say 2 things quickly. First is that, I mean, it sounds complicated. It honestly isn't. Project grants is about what's the project, who do you think it's going to engage, what do the finances look like, and if we give you the money, can you manage it? So that's, you know, it's a very simple, rounded, I mean, process. DYCP is even more simpler in terms of application. The second thing is that they're really competitive funds, particularly, you know, during the pandemic. That there is a lot of demand for, you know, increasingly kind of pressured money. So so success rates aren't nearly as high as we used to be experiencing. But anyway, over to you now or over to you, Teresa, to filter the questions.
Can I ask if you can hear me?
Mm-hmm.
I had been struggling with the Grantium. The profile was registered a couple of times and is just not letting me, when it says click on a certain button, tap on that, it just does not allow you to do that. And can I also ask, why is it that we can't talk to somebody on the phone? Because, and the third point is, my administrator, who had been helping me to fill this form in, and in fact, he was told 2-3 emails that were sent that I have to do it, he can't do it. He shouldn't be allowed to. I do not understand, because James said that someone who has some experience of budgeting who could help me, but I think your system is not allowing me to do that.
Okay, I can just quickly brief that, and then I think, Teresa, you're going to filter the questions, are you? Is that right? Yeah.
Yes.
Look, I mean, Grantium is particularly is a very particular system. It's quite economical for the Arts Council to put in, so it means that we can put other funds to grants. I don't know what the particular buttons are, but I mean, if our inquiries team should be able to help you with that. So I bet it's difficult for me to answer that just at the moment. As far as other people using your Grantium profile, I don't see what the problem is with that. I think that should be possible. And I can't remember the third point you made about Grantium, but maybe we can take that one offline. But I think everything that you said, it should be resolvable. You know, and many thousands of people use it, so it just may be a particular glitch in your profile or something, which they will sort out. But thank you for your question. Teresa, over to you.
Yes, Nina wanted to ask a very specific thing as well, about the word commercial. Do you want to ask that question, Nina? You're muted.
That's a wonderful start, isn't it? I shall start again. Just really looking at the idea of when you submit a project, and if it's thought of as looking as commercial, what does commercial look like to you? What would you describe it? Something that comes in that you would say and maybe tag as a commercial project and wouldn't really be acceptable, or is acceptable?
Well, I'm happy to take this one, James or Erica or you. But firstly, we won't fund any project that pays a dividend or a profit to shareholders, so that could be considered commercial. Also, it needs to be a balanced budget, so we won't fund anything that turns a profit for the individual. So expenditure and income needs to match in terms of your application, and you would need to send in a budget afterwards to show that is the case. We do fund commercial organisations, but it would be distinct activity that they might undertake. It might be the charitable trust of an organisation, or a particular project that they're doing that fits our objectives, but which is distinct from their other commercial activities. James,
yeah, I was just going to add, just to sort of, obviously a lot of writing projects are very long term as well, so they may have commercial kind of viability later on, but at this stage perhaps not at the writing stage. And if Arts Council can do anything, it's to sort of top up that amount that you need to create the piece of work. For example, I can't remember the quite exact figure, but the average book advance I think is probably around £3,000, £5,000. So and that's not extrapolated, not necessarily a great payment to write a full novel, for example. So if you can absolutely show that in your budget, that you've got advances coming in, and where Arts Council can support is to help give you the time and space in order to actually get that thing written.
Great, thank you. And just talking about you know, what happens if you put in an application and you come in under budget, you've basically budgeted, you basically haven't done your homework, and that often happens. We overspend and we come under. How soon can you apply for another grant, and is there any other way of topping up that? Do you have to do that 6-week window?
Yeah, go on, James.
So not really any way of topping up. I suppose that comes down to the management and finance section and the forecasting ahead, and we would expect you to sort of project ahead. Some people put contingency lines in their budgets, which do help to kind of hopefully cover any unforeseen costs. And it's worth saying, I think Erica did, but in terms of your final reporting, we're not expecting everything to have gone exactly the way that you thought it would. We're not even expecting, in many cases, the exact amount to be spent on the exact amount that it was. If money shifts around where it's necessary, then that's all part of the learning, and you sort of will tell us that story that you've learned in there. But yeah, once your application is in, and once it's hopefully successful, there's not really any way to sort of recall it and add to it, unfortunately.
Okay.
With one grant that I got, we knew we were going to have to spend a bit more money, not a lot, and so we crowdfunded for that little extra amount of money, which then allowed us to pay more just to some of the actors, and it just it was £1,000 or something, but it was just enough. So yeah, that seemed to be one way of dealing with it. But
and Nina, you also asked about, I know it was related to topping up, but the idea of when you can make another application again.
Yeah.
And so as soon as you've had a decision made on any grant application you've submitted, you can submit a new application. So it could almost be that same day. So you could apply for an under 15,000, which is going to take you 6 weeks. So in the meantime, you could be writing and preparing another application. And then once you've had the decision for the first one, you could submit another one. Now, what you need to bear in mind is that we're aware of that. And so what starts to build up is a sense of risk for us as to how much funding we're awarding the one applicant. So you need to factor that into any subsequent applications, that you're acknowledging the other grants that you hold, that you have the financial, in your finance section, in your management sections, that you're demonstrating that you can manage those two grants concurrently and that level of funding. But you can really sort of, so you can plan, particularly for sort of a theatre application where you might come in for an R&D, then you might come in for a rehearsal period, then you might come in for a premiere, and so you can sort of plan a rhythm to when you want to submit all of those different applications.
Great.
Sorry, there was something, some of the questions that came up were the same as some of the questions we'd written, which was what are the timescales? They've slightly changed, although you said that amount. Actually, on the grant application I'm writing at the moment, it says actually 10 weeks for the minimum one for under 15,000, and I can't remember what it is.
It's
so
about 16, I think, for the
in red writing, because there's obviously so many.
So what I think, quite quickly on that one, yes, it is because there's so many. So 3 things are happening. Number one, there's just an unprecedented demand from our normal grant schemes, just because of COVID and artists being out of work, etc., etc. Secondly, that we've launched 2 new programs, or increased one, which is allowing national portfolio organisations to apply for project grants, which has meant an influx of applications. And also we've increased the DYCP scheme, which we get many applications for. And thirdly, of course, we've been administering the cultural recovery grants as well, which is the whole Arts Council. So it has meant, I mean, there's not been any extra resource to do this, so, or not much extra resource to do this. So it's meant that the timescales have just slowed down, unfortunately. I mean, we're doing our best to get back on track, but I can't see it happening anytime soon.
There was another question also in this vein, which was, originally you didn't, I mean, originally in a project grant you had to provide a huge percentage of match funding, and then due to COVID we didn't have to do that anymore. Do you have in your mind a time when that will be added again?
I don't know if James and Erica know this specifically, but from what I can gather, there is no specific time. Well, I can't see, nobody can see that the kind of the investment, if you like, match funding market is going to be buoyant anytime soon. It may well be, but at the moment, I don't believe. I mean, you need to be clear about what you've done and what you're going to try in your application, and there's going to need to be some effort towards that. But I can't see that. I mean, I'm speaking slightly out of turn here, but I can't see that being changed anytime soon.
Yeah, it's already been extended. It was up until April initially, and it's been extended again to August. So we don't have another date of if that's going to change at the minute, as Neil said, for those reasons. And yes, we did before that. It was a minimum of 10% that you needed to demonstrate for match funding. And so for the under 15s, we really weren't expecting much more than 10%. And the only place where we would really start to be expecting more than 10% is as you're applying for the larger grants over 15,000.
Great. There was also a question in the chat, say, for developing creative process fund, how specific do we have to get? And are we locked into the plan we propose?
I'll take that, having just been on a panel. Specificity and sort of clarity of your ideas, certainly. It's a bit of a double-edged sword, because it's your chance to be experimental. So there's no need to have any outcomes. We don't need to see any work. You don't even need to produce any work. It might just be a sort of learning period. But if you are, for example, saying the kind of development that you want to make, for example, being a poet and wanting to explore writing creative nonfiction, the specifics there would be, what are you going to do? Who are you going to work with in order to make that look like what learning you kind of undertake to make that look like a realistic thing to happen. So yeah, be specific and sort of lock stuff in without paying for it. But yeah, no need to kind of produce anything as well.
Right. I saw another one here that I quite like. Somebody's saying here, Sarah, saying, I saw some figures in the stage in May that suggested that women have a lower success rate than other underrepresented groups. Average success rate is 38%. For women, it's only 30%. Is anything being done to address that in the grant situation? And does that make sense? Can anyone take that?
It does make sense. I don't necessarily completely recognise those figures. Do you know anything about that, James or Erica? No. So I mean, in the end, of course, applications are taken on the merit rather than rather than any other reason. But I can't directly answer that at the moment, because I'm not completely aware of those figures. But I mean, I should imagine that's completely changed over the last year, just because of the amount of applications we've had in. So it might have got better, it might have got worse, but I don't know. But it's likely to have changed.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Teresa, do you have one that you want to ask very quickly?
Yes, there was one very specific question. Was about writing for new opera and music theatre. And this actually is also very specific, especially to do with for women writers, because it's a craft that has not really embraced women. And at the moment, there's something called Engender, which the Royal Opera House has been. I've seen some of the most diverse and the most amazing things there that I've almost ever seen, and including the audiences. It has been wonderful, but there's very, very little to pay writers to write new opera or music theatre in. And is this something that is considered a good thing to apply for a grant for, or does the Arts Council feel that what it supplies to something like the Royal Opera House is enough? I'm just wondering whether...
We definitely welcome applications from individuals or organisations that are not the Royal Opera House for their work on opera, and it's really, really important that we fund, across the sector and across the country. So yes, we absolutely welcome those sorts of applications, and also ones from musical theatre as well. It is tricky for musical theatre because of the costs often, actually. To do a really meaningful R&D for musical theatre requires a lot of people in the room, and so that pushes you more towards the over 15,000 as those current boundaries are, which can be really competitive and challenging. But so those are the sort of added sort of elements that you need to really address, but it's about making the strongest possible case that you can. It isn't that we don't want to fund that, it is just about us assessing it along with all the other applications we have. But yes, we would really welcome applications like that.
Yeah, and also this other strange thing called music theatre, which is kind of experimental opera as well, which is definitely burgeoning internationally. And I don't know, I think the opera world see that as something, but it's definitely growing here. And that's the other thing about international work. that we wanted to ask, which was, I think we got from you earlier that it's got to be something that is seen here. So, but will you fund international collaborations?
Sorry, Teresa, sorry, that was my question. Hi. I'm writing something at the moment, which I haven't been able to get anything here in the UK because of certain issues around diversity. And so I'm looking to an American theatre company. And because of the links to the diaspora here in the UK, I would then look to connect also in the Caribbean and here. So, so that was the problem, is that I can't get it off the ground here because of those diversity issues that we unfortunately exist here in the UK. But I can, there's more of an open door in America. But obviously I'm living here, and as an British artist, you know, how do I apply for funding to support that process?
I mean, I think you can. It has to be. It would have to visit here, though. It would have to be performed for artists, for audiences in England. That's the National Lottery rules. So, so we do fund projects that we would like to have an international life, and many of the dance companies we fund do. Particularly have international life, but but if we give you a project grant for a piece of work, it has to be produced and shown in England as well. It could well go abroad, but the costs would need to be, those costs would need to be largely met by the other partner. Anybody else?
So would I have to do that under developing my own?
No, that would be a project grant, I would have thought.
So how would I approach that? Would I then have to, because obviously there aren't really many black theatre companies. So I'd have to go and talk to a black theatre company here and ask them as a white writer, because they don't tend to support, I've asked them before, support white writers. So I have a personal connection to the story, so that's why I'm writing it. But
you could apply for the grant. You could apply for the project grant.
You're saying that I couldn't, because I don't have a deal or anything, but I'm writing a perspective. So I would have to list the company in Massachusetts, and then
Kate, it sounds, it's quite, can I just jump in here? Kate, it sounds quite complex. Is this something that Erica, maybe you could email Erica or James about, and then they can really help you unpack and really look at it in more detail. So, you know,
yeah, that would be great. Because I mean, obviously I can't get any funding for anything. So
wonderful. I saw their details was in the chat. So do reach out to them now, and they can follow up on that for you, Kate, and you can ask as many questions as you need to really to get into really how to move forward. By the sounds of it, it sounds like you've come to gridlock, and I think Erica and James will be able to help you with that. Yeah, would that be good?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Well, I hope they can help, but yes.
Yeah, but it's good to follow up.
Thank you.
Yeah, great. Can I jump in? I have another one here. Just saying, I'm a new member. My local theatre wants to include a full production of my new play as part of their spring season 2022, asking me to apply for, you know, the Arts Council grant at 15K. Does this make me the producer, as I'll be managing the budget? I have a director, and we're already worked 2 days R&D, public script in hand, sharing, etc. I can't see how I can include a payment for writing it alongside other costs to actors, designers, etc., etc. So do I not bother? That's from Christine. So what can somebody expand on that, or do you have a view on that, Erica, Neil, or James?
I think probably Erica or James, are you better off picking up on that one?
I'm not 100% sure, Nina. I think I wonder if that's one that I can pick up at another time, because I feel like I need to unpick that a little bit more.
Lovely. What I would say to, thank you, Erica. What I would say to any members that that are in this kind of almost like stalemate conundrum, to follow up with Erica or James and really sort of get to the nitty-gritty of what you need for your application to really have a better understanding. And that's not just to anyone applying. I mean, they've opened up their emails to all of us. So please do use it freely, I would say. Don't be shy. And if you really think you have something that's really troubling you and you can't quite get to the nut of it, please do ask them. We're coming up to the hour and I know we have to finish on time. So I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you so much, everyone, for coming along. But also thank you to Neil, Erica and James. And I was just wondering if you had any final words that you could give to the writers, you know, some kind of hope that they, you know, give them more confidence to apply for the grant, knowing that they can.
Yeah, we can. I mean, one of the questions I saw that came up quite regularly was about public engagement. I just thought I'd quickly address. Was about if you're a writer, you can probably do the finances, you can probably tell everybody you can manage the project, and the idea of quality is good, but how are you going to prove us you engage a public? One of the rules of the National Lottery is you engage a public, and so obviously if you're putting on a theatre show, you can do that. And there's let me just admit James back in. He had trouble with his you can do that and prove that more easily. If you're, I mean, I think, and there was a couple of comments I noticed quickly. It's about partnerships. If you're showcasing or you're sharing your stuff with publishers, if you have a publisher, then it gives us confidence that the piece you're writing or the screenplay you're writing or whatever will find its way to a wider audience. So it doesn't, the work you're doing doesn't immediately have to find an audience, but at the end of the process, you have some kind of sharing, some kind of reading, you've got other partnerships involved, then that will go a long way to helping you make the public engagement the argument. So I saw a lot come up about that. So no, look, it's sorry it's been quick. It has been a pleasure. The presentation we'll send to you so you can see it. Again, you know, do follow up with Erica and James. Obviously they're quite busy at the moment as well. So you know, essential questions only if you can. But and there's also, if you don't, there's our inquiries line if you have particular technical issues or there's something you don't understand. But if there's something art form specific, then they would be happy to help. Erica, have I missed anything, or did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, it is just to acknowledge that this is quite quick and there's clearly a lot of complexity in what people need. So yeah, just to reiterate, Neil, to say you can either contact James and I, or also inquiries if it's much more technical, because I won't know. I'm not that good on Grantium either.
Yeah, the inquiries is really, really amazing and so helpful. And I mean, I have to say that it really is worth applying, and the grant I got actually changed my life as a writer utterly. And I mean, my whole life changed. So, but I was given a lot of help. I was given help, but it really is worth applying.
So on that note, I'm going to say thank you so much, everyone. Do apply to, you know, the Arts Council for whatever amount you think you need. Really budget really well, give it a lot of thought, really try and partner as much as you can, try and collaborate. It is all about sort of the community, from what I'm hearing, really making sure your projects are really more aligned, and really get any kind of specific funding and help that you can, and really put as much future planning into that application as you possibly can. And all the best with all the applications, and thank you so much for turning up. I really appreciate it. To Neil Darlison, to Erica Campayne, and to James Trevelyan, thank you so much for all your time. We really appreciate all your thoughts, and we know that we're going to get the slides afterwards, and it's been absolutely brilliant. So thank you. And to Teresa, my co-host, amazing lady, wonderful, and to the ladies behind the scenes as well, to Kate and to Eleanor. Thank you so much, everyone, for all your help, and goodbye. And do tap into us as well at the Writers Guild if you have any further questions that we can maybe filter and pass on as well. Thank you so much, everyone.